Hello everybody. For today's lesson we will be discussing the elements of a short story. A short story is a brief form of fiction that is longer than an anecdote, but shorter than a novella or a novel. Short stories have no set length, and in terms of word count, there is no set distinction between an anecdote, a short story, a novella, and a novel. The first element of a short story we'll be discussing is that of character. A character is a person, sometimes even an animal, who takes part in the action of a short story. A good short story includes a main character who is faced with challenges and obstacles that they must overcome. A successful fiction writer knows how to develop characters by using description, dialogue, action, and more. There are several different character types in a short story, the primary one being that of the protagonist and the antagonist. A short story typically requires a central character, hero, or protagonist. This character is usually opposite an antagonist, who is also a major character of the short story. Most of the story's plot should be driven by the protagonist's words and actions. Short stories frequently include major characters such as the protagonist and the antagonist. Short stories also often include minor characters, who the fiction writer usually defines by a single idea or quality. These types of characters are necessary for the story, but they are not important. These are secondary characters to the story. Static characters don't change as the story progresses. They are typically minor characters, and the writer spends little time developing them. A dynamic character, by contrast, is a more well-rounded character, one that typically grows and develops as the story advances. After character, our next element is that of setting. The setting of a short story is the time and place in which it happens. Authors often use descriptions of landscape, scenery, buildings, seasons, or weather to provide a strong sense of setting. Setting is conveyed by the location of the plot, including but not limited to the region, geography, climate, neighborhood, buildings, and interiors. Different types of setting types. We have the locale. That's where is it? Does it take place in the United States? Does it take place in space? Does it take place on an island somewhere? This is the main setting for your story. After that, it's time. When does it take place? Does it take place in the past? Does it take place in the future? Does it take place at midnight? Does it take place in the morning? This is important for just capturing how and where the story is. What time is it? When is it? Mood and atmosphere. Depending on the type of short story you're reading or trying to write, the mood and atmosphere is really important for determining what the novel is supposed to be about. Is it supposed to be tense? Is it supposed to be suspenseful? Is it supposed to be hopeful? Is it supposed to be dramatic? What type of mood is it? Climate. This usually refers to the weather. Is it raining? Is it hot? What is the climate? Always helps set the setting. Is it snowing? Geography. Geography can refer to both natural geography and man-made geography. Does it take place in the mountains? Does it take place on the plains? Does it take place in big wide open spaces where cowboys are driving cattle through? Does it take place in the jungle? As far as man-made geography, does it take place in the ruins of an ancient city? Does it take place on a man-made monument? Or there's different types of geography. Eras of historical importance. When does it take place? And at what specific time period? Does it take place in the Roaring '20s? Does it take place in the Roman Empire days? Does it take place in the Stone Age? all of these different periods, not necessarily the time, but like an era that we know of as being significant in history. Population, does it take place in a densely crowded place like Shanghai, or does it take place in New York City, or does it take place in a more sparsely populated area like the Gobi Desert? Ancestral influences. This is important when talking about specific regions that have cultural influences, especially ones that have multiple cultural influences. Well, when we talk about maybe the Middle East, if your setting is in the Middle East, then ancestral influences are super important, because we're talking about years and years of tradition and religion and different cultural customs, and all of these are very important for your setting as well. After setting, our next element is that of plot. A plot is a series of events and character actions that relate to the central conflict. So this here is a nifty chart that basically maps out the plot of your typical short story. Most short stories open with exposition, which is the introduction of the characters and the basic situation, your setup for the story. After you've set things up, you immediately establish the conflict, which is the struggle between opposing forces that drive the action of the story. Once you've have all those settings and the conflict established, then we get to the rising action, which is building towards the climax. And the climax is really the purpose of the short story. When a writer starts a short story, he is writing to get to the climax. When you get captured by a short story and your attention cannot be broken, it's usually building to the climax. Your rising action is taking you there, and that's what has your attention. And as soon as the climax happens, then the action falls, and that's kind of the slowing down of the story, which leads to the resolution, which is the ending, the outcome of the conflict, what happened. The conflict is a struggle between two opposing forces in a short story. The main character is usually on one side of the central conflict. They may struggle against another important character, against the forces of nature, against society, or even against something inside themselves, such as emotions or ailments, like a broken leg. There are various types of conflict types. There is conflict with another character. Usually this is the protagonist-antagonist relationship in a story. After that, we have conflict with nature. This type of conflict is usually found in survival stories, or stories where the setting really plays a significant role in the story. Maybe your character is stuck in the jungle and has to find his way out, or maybe he's in quicksand and has to figure out a way to get out. But there are so many different types of natural conflicts, man against nature. After that, there is conflict with society. This is your characters struggling with the way things are, and maybe they don't agree with them, but this is a conflict with societal norms, or just things that can't easily be changed. Character versus self is another conflict. This is a character's struggle with what's inside them. Maybe they're struggling with a difficult decision, or with certain beliefs they have that they may be struggling with. But this is a more personal conflict. Then we have a character versus fate. This conflict is when a character knows that they are destined to be something, maybe the heir to a throne, and they don't want to be king, and their conflict with this would be an example of a character versus fate. concluding our list of elements with the short story, the last thing is theme. The theme in a short story is its main idea. It is the author's vision conveyed through the work. The theme may be the author's thoughts about a topic or a particular viewpoint they want to share. The title of the short story usually helps point to what the writer is attempting to say.